You are now tuned into Check This Out News. We connect the streets. There's a lot of hype surrounding digital currencies and how the blockchain could solve problems facing the adult industry, let alone the entertainment industry overall. So here on Check This Out News today, we have the first female CEO of Penthouse Global Media. Kelly Holland is with us. Kelly, how you feeling?
I'm feeling okay. I've finally got what everybody else in my office has had. Got the flu, so my voice sounds a little deep and sexy, which is okay.
We'll take it.
I could do without it, but it's okay. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, you're a maverick in the adult industry, but can you tell our listeners what enticed you about being in the adult film industry?
Well, it's crazy. I've been in the business for 20 years, and I came from being a war zone journalist in Central America. I was covering the Nicaragua issue and the Contras. I was covering the Salvadorian war. And I came back here and I started doing documentaries here. I was covering the gang violence down in the Rampart district between the 18th Street Tray and Mara Salvatrucha. Did a piece on guns in America, and then was looking around for something to do. And one of my outlets in Australia said, "Hey, what about the adult industry, which is so specific to kind of the U.S. thing, right?" So I did a documentary on the adult business, and I'm a progressive and a liberal, and I had not given it much thought, but I thought I knew what I would find. I was subject to all the cliches that one has about the business. When I actually got in and started interviewing people and doing this documentary, I found that the women in the business were particularly interesting, very articulate, very thoughtful about why they were in the business, and it began to really change my view on women and women in this industry. And that really opened up my vision of women claiming their own sexuality, and this is many years before the term slut shaming, okay? But really, these women were living that, and they didn't always intend to be these political, sort of lightning rods, but that's in fact what they were doing. And I think that at the end of the day, it became really political for me, and it has remained political for me for the last 20 years. I look at, on a broad spectrum, I look at the women in this industry who refuse to be judged. They leave that to you. You want to judge them for taking their clothes off and having sex on camera. That's your business, but they're not going to accept your judgment. And I love that. Wow. And by doing that, they say something else. They say to the world, look, if you choose as a woman to be celibate, mazel tov, that's great. If you choose to be in a monogamous relationship, that's fabulous too. If you choose to be in a same-sex relationship, that's your business, no one else's. And if you choose to be me, the girl in the industry who's having sex on camera for a living, that's my business as well, and it's no one else's business. And they're just fearless in their approach, and I love that. And that does not mean that there are not broken toys in this business, as there are in all businesses. I say, there are women in this industry who I say are susceptible to the same kind of Paris Hilton syndrome as Paris Hilton, which is too young, too much money, too much notoriety, goes to your head, makes you crazy. But at the end of the day, they have to show up, they have to be on time, they have to have their wits about them. So they can't just spin off, or they end up spinning off in this Darwinian world where they just move themselves out of the industry because they're unreliable. So the women are really extraordinary, and you don't know that when you see these sort of superficial interviews or superficial judgments about who they are.
Is there anybody publicly you can speak to who has that type of attention on them?
Stormy Daniels, porn star. We just did a shoot with Stormy Daniels 2 days ago. Stormy Daniels is a Penthouse pet. I've known her for 20 years. She was a sweet, well-intentioned, morally grounded, wonderful woman 20 years ago, and she is as well now. And we just did a big photo shoot with her, a huge interview, which is going to come out in our next issue of the magazine. And, it kind of bugs me, frankly, when every headline on CNN or MSNBC is Stormy Daniels porn star. How much is Stormy Daniels? I mean, we've already got that she was a porn star. You only had to say that one time. But it's like that's her moniker. And that just is an attempt to easily reduce her to something that you think means something when you say porn star, and that would be okay if everybody actually knew these women and knew that the definition was a little bit broader.
So, Kelly, I know Stormy has the 60 Minutes interview coming up, and of course you have your interview as well. Would you say you were able to come across anything additionally that the public might find shocking?
Well, we talked to her. I mean, look, we already know what the 60 Minutes interview is. But we talked to her, we got into all of that, but we also got into what I hope is a broader conversation with her about what this has meant for her. She didn't choose to be, Stormy didn't choose to be this, right? This isn't a political thing for her. She didn't come out and say, oh, I want to be the lightning rod for the anti-Trump movement. I don't think she had an opinion on it. She got thrust there because of Trump's lawyer, frankly. So now she's just standing up for herself, and that's what you find with a lot of these women is they're bold, they're self-possessed. They are in general, and this is a generalization, it does not go for all of them, but generally, these are the women that were just too smart to sit still in school. They were the renegades. And the men too, by the way. The men too. A lot of these guys are like, I say guys, not gender, but just...
It's understood.
Were just the ones that were always kind of renegade, the ones that always felt they were outside of the house, not inside of the house, and they had to go a separate path. And I actually understand that because I felt that I was the same when I was growing up. I didn't want that. I didn't want that traditional, predictable life.
Sure.
I wanted something different. I just didn't know what it was. And it led me to a lot of things. It led me to working for Pat Robertson and the 700 Club and Christian Broadcasting. They didn't know I was an infidel at the time, but I was just an audio engineer that happened to get a gig.
Not an infidel.
Yeah. There's my humble roots. Look what Pat Robertson did to me.
There you go.
So it took me there. It took me out here as an actress, and it took me out of acting and back into my production roots, which led me to working in war zones, which I loved, which led me here, and I've loved being in this business. And now, crazy. I own this amazing brand.
You own the brand. That's the key.
I own it.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you.
No. Go ahead.
I was going to say. I mean, we're seeing more women watching porn now than males. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, it's interesting. I came to Penthouse to create their broadcast division. I was asked to basically create the look and the feel of the brand in a broadcast space. But I came from a company called Playgirl, which was also launching broadcasts, and I was asked all the way back into like 2004, I think, to create the look and the feel for Playgirl and what do women want to watch, what kind of erotica moves them. I could talk about that. It's a whole other story, a whole other subject, but and it's an interesting one too because it's not what you would believe. But
there's a part two to this. I can see Kelly.
Yeah, there's a part two. But I will tell you that we have two magazines that we publish. We have Penthouse, the main magazine, and then we have another magazine which sells twice as much as Penthouse, and it's called Penthouse Letters. Dear Penthouse Letters. That has been part of our brand since the 80s, and that's originally was the letter to the editor section, and people started back in the 80s started writing in about their sexual fantasies and their sexual adventures. And nobody asked them. We didn't go out and say, hey, start writing. It's just people wanted to talk about it. You got to think back into the Masters and Johnson period where nobody talked about sex, and then Masters and Johnson went and did this huge broad-based research study about what's happening in the bedrooms of America in the 50s and 60s and also into the 70s. And it wasn't what everybody thought. It wasn't, Leave It to Beaver.
Right.
It was well beyond that. And the same thing in Penthouse Letters. People were finding this anonymous place where they could talk about their fantasies. Those fantasies have been, that's as much part of human nature as your most basic instincts for food and shelter, right? Yeah. Those fantasies, whatever they may be, have been with humans since they dropped out of the trees 125,000 years ago. So it's not like all of a sudden it came to us, recently in the last 10 years. So people were writing about their fantasies, And that became it became so popular that Bob Guccione, the founder of Penthouse, God rest his soul, spun it out to a different magazine, and now it sells twice as much as the main magazine, and 50% of our readers, roughly, as best as we can tell, are women. And that's because we've always known this. Men are visually cued. It's like all about what they see. For women, it's all about what they think. So it's not all, but I mean, they're basically moved by the thought of it, which is why erotic fiction and the 50 Shades of Grey phenomenon and Penthouse letters moves women and touches them in a deeper way. So what does that mean when you translate it into video? There's some exceptions to this, but generally it means that women want a context to the it's got to be a fantasy that has a context. It can't be in a vacuum.
You are the first female CEO of Penthouse. How did you cut through all of that in an era where we're just finding out about Me Too and all these other things that seemingly could be so oppressive? How were you able to rise to the top of the company and do your thing?
Well, I ask myself that all the time because I really grapple with all of the issues surrounding the Me Too movement and all of the struggles that women feel and have experienced. For whatever reason, maybe because I'm 5'10", and that means I'm taller than most men, whatever. I don't know. Maybe all of that stuff came to me. I vaguely remember it did, but I just never accepted it in a way. If someone, put it this way, if someone grabbed me, I would simply turn around and say, "Get your grubby paws off of me, or you're going to find a knee right between your legs." Or, it's just...
That sounds scary, Kelly. I'm convinced.
Yeah, are you?
I'm convinced.
Yeah. No, it's just because. But look, that doesn't say anything about other people's experiences because me being a hyper aggressive, non-feminine. I don't know. I don't want to use the word feminine, but not.
You're an alpha. You're an alpha.
Yeah, I'm an alpha. I'm a total alpha.
You're alpha.
And I was just doing this interview because we're working on a show for VH1. I'm hoping it's going to go to VH1 about Penthouse and all of the women that work here because there's a lot of women that work here. Now, I didn't set out to hire a lot of women as a statement, even though I'm a progressive and I am out front on progressive issues. I didn't go out to try to create a company that had a bunch of women. I just hired the best people I found, and it turned out one day I looked up and went, wow, I've got like a whole lot of women working here. And there's a lot of women in key positions. So it's interesting because we're working on a pilot for a show that's kind of about like, what does it mean to now have this very iconic men's brand which has a soapbox in the middle of the town square that can talk about sexuality and the relationship between men and women, and in the context of the magazine, what does it mean to shoot a centerfold, and how do you convey the image of what makes a woman erotic, and what are we saying as women to do that, and on and on and on and on. There's a lot of interesting questions, and where does that sit when it's coming from my perspective? And I said in the interview, I don't know that gender is the strongest thing that drives me. I'm sure it affects me, but there's also the aesthetic of Kelly Holland that drives me. There's the fact that I'm Irish, that I'm redhead, that I'm this, that I'm that I was a hippie. I mean, there's a lot of things that motivate me. Gender is not always the driving force, but I will tell you that it's powerful right now. It probably would have always been powerful, but it's particularly powerful right now. Mm-hmm. To be sitting with this magazine because we can give a platform for all sorts of conversations, and I'll give you an example. We have a thing we do in the magazine called Pop Shots, and it's where we get celebrities, pop celebrities, all kinds of people. We've had Dave Navarro from Ink Master and Nine Inch Nails. Yeah. We've had Michael K. Williams, who was the drug dealer on The Wire and was Chalky on Boardwalk Empire. He shot a phenomenal... So what we say to those people is, come on in, and we want you to do a takeover on a layout, and we want you to shoot what you think epitomizes a woman's sexuality and sensuality. We had Stevie J from Love and Hip Hop Atlanta come in. Wow. And Stevie did an amazing shoot. Stevie came in, and it was actually covered by Love and Hip Hop on an episode. And we were talking it through, like, what do you think it should be? And our only rule, you can do whatever you want. Our only rule is it has to be legal, and it cannot